One decision, one phone call, one miscalculation, and the world almost went to war overnight. What you're about to hear isn't just history. It's a pattern, a deadly, repeating cycle that almost triggered World War III more than once. And the most terrifying part? One of these moments you've never heard about. And it came within minutes of killing thousands of Americans. Stay with me, because that story is coming. The United States and Iran, two nations locked in a Cold War that occasionally gets very, very hot. Most people think this conflict started recently. They're wrong. It goes back decades. It involves assassinations, bombings, down planes, and near-nuclear confrontations. It involves American sailors held hostage, Iranian generals killed by drones, and a commercial airliner full of innocent passengers shot out of the sky. This is not a political video. This is the raw, brutal, documented history of the deadliest moments between two of the most dangerous forces on the planet. And we're going to go through every single one. Chapter 1. The revolution that started it all. To understand why these two nations hate each other, you need to go back to 1979. Before that year, Iran and America were allies, close allies. The U.S. had even helped install Iran's ruler, the Shah, a man Washington trusted, a man they believed would keep the region stable and keep the oil flowing. But the Iranian people were furious. They had watched their culture get dismantled, their religion pushed aside, their sovereignty handed to a foreign-backed dictator, and they had reached their breaking point. On February 1st, 1979, everything changed. A man named Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile. Crowds of millions flooded the streets of Tehran to welcome him. The Shah fled the country, and Iran transformed overnight into an Islamic republic, one built on a single foundation: opposition to American power. America's closest Middle Eastern ally had become its most dangerous enemy. But that was just the beginning, because 9 months later, something happened that would scar both nations for generations. Something that still shapes the hatred between Washington and Tehran to this very day. Chapter 2, for 144 Days of Hell, the hostage crisis. November 4th, 1979. Tehran, Iran. A mob of Iranian students stormed the United States Embassy. They weren't just protesters. They were organized, trained, and they had a mission. 66 Americans were seized. Diplomats, staff, security personnel. They were blindfolded, bound, paraded on television for the entire world to watch. And then nothing. Days turned to weeks. Weeks turned to months. The images of blindfolded Americans being led through screaming crowds played on every television set in the United States. And the U.S. government, the most powerful government on earth, appeared completely helpless. President Jimmy Carter tried everything: negotiations, economic sanctions, diplomatic pressure from allies. Nothing worked. So he authorized a secret military rescue mission. It was called Operation Eagle Claw. Elite Delta Force operators, specially modified helicopters, a plan to fly into Tehran under cover of darkness and extract the hostages by force. It ended in catastrophe. 2 aircraft collided in the Iranian desert during the operation. 8 American soldiers burned to death, not from enemy fire, not from Iranian bullets, from mechanical failure and a sandstorm in the dark, miles from their target. The hostages stayed captive for 444 days. That is over a year. Over a year of families not knowing if their loved ones were alive. Over a year of a nation watching its flag burned in the streets of Tehran. They were finally released. And this is where it gets strange. They were released on the exact day Ronald Reagan was inaugurated as president. January 20th, 1981. Not one day before. Not one day after. Many historians have spent decades asking, was there a secret deal? Did Reagan's team negotiate behind Carter's back to delay the release and humiliate a sitting president? That question has never fully been answered. The documents remain classified. But what happened next between the U.S. and Iran would be far deadlier than any diplomatic scandal. Chapter 3. The war nobody talks about, the tanker war, the 1980s. Iran and Iraq are locked in a brutal 8-year war. A war that would kill over 1 million people. One of the bloodiest conflicts of the entire 20th century. and America quietly picks sides. Washington backs Saddam Hussein's Iraq. They provide intelligence. They provide financing. And when Iran begins threatening oil tankers in the Persian Gulf, tankers carrying oil that the entire global economy depends on, the United States Navy steps in to protect them. Iranian Revolutionary Guard speedboats start laying mines. They attack neutral shipping. They fire on vessels in international waters, and the U.S. fires back. In April 1988, the U.S. Navy destroys Iranian oil platforms and sinks several Iranian naval vessels in a single day. It is the largest American naval battle since World War II, and almost no one remembers it. But what comes next, no one has ever forgotten, at least not in Iran. July 3rd, 1988, the USS Vincennes, a guided missile cruiser operating in the Persian Gulf, detects an aircraft climbing from Iranian territory. The crew is on high alert. The battle earlier that year is fresh in their minds. They believe they are tracking an Iranian F-14 fighter jet preparing to attack. They fire 2 surface-to-air missiles. The target is Iran Air Flight 655, a commercial passenger aircraft, climbing in altitude on a scheduled flight path filled with 290 passengers and crew, including 66 children. Every single person on board is killed. The U.S. government calls it a tragic mistake, a case of misidentification in a war zone. The captain of the USS Vincennes is later awarded the Legion of Merit, one of America's highest military honors, for his service during that period. Iran calls it deliberate murder, and they never forget it. Many historians and intelligence analysts believe that Iran Air Flight 655 directly inspired the deadliest terrorist attack in the Western world before September 11th. 5 months after that shoot-down, on December 21st, 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 explodes over Lockerbie, Scotland. 270 people killed. Investigators eventually convict a Libyan intelligence officer, but the suspected Iranian connection, the theory that Tehran ordered the bombing as revenge for Flight 655, has never been fully dismissed. The blood trail between these two nations runs long, and it runs deep. Chapter 4, Shadows and Proxies, Iran's Global War on America. Iran learned something critical from the 1980s. Direct confrontation with the United States military is suicidal. America has more ships, more planes, more firepower. You cannot defeat them head-on. So they changed their entire strategy. They went to shadows. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, militias in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. Iran built an entire network of armed proxy groups, what they call the Axis of Resistance, stretching across the Middle East. And they used this network to bleed America slowly, quietly, with deniability. Beirut, Lebanon. A massive truck bomb destroys the U.S. Marine barracks. 241 American servicemen are killed while they sleep. It remains the deadliest attack on U.S. Marines since the Battle of Iwo Jima in World War II. U.S. intelligence links the bombing to Hezbollah. Hezbollah, trained, funded, armed, and directed by Iran's Revolutionary Guard. President Reagan pulls American forces out of Lebanon shortly after. Iran watches, and they take notes. The lesson they draw is brutal in its simplicity. If you kill enough Americans, America will leave. They apply this lesson again in Iraq after 2003. Iranian-backed militias flood across the border and begin targeting U.S. soldiers with a weapon specifically engineered to defeat American armor. It's called an EFP, an explosively formed penetrator, a device that fires a molten copper slug capable of cutting through the side of an armored vehicle like paper. Hundreds of U.S. soldiers are killed by these weapons. Every single device traced back to Iranian Revolutionary Guard manufacturing facilities. Iran is fighting a war against America. They have been for decades. They just never fight it in a way that forces America to respond with full military power. But all of this, every ambush, every bombing, every proxy attack, is building towards something bigger, something that in January 2020 would bring these two nations closer to open war than at any point in history. Chapter 5, the drone strike that almost started World War III. January 2nd, 2020, Baghdad International Airport, 2:47 in the morning. A convoy of vehicles leaves the airport terminal. Inside one of them, General Qasem Soleimani, commander of the Quds Force, the architect of Iran's entire proxy network across the Middle East, the man personally responsible, directly or indirectly, for the deaths of hundreds of American soldiers over 2 decades. He is also one of the most revered figures inside Iran, a national hero to millions, a man who had survived assassinations before, a man who believed he was untouchable. An American MQ-9 Reaper drone had been tracking him for hours. The order came from President Donald Trump. Take him out. The drone fired. The convoy was destroyed. Soleimani was killed along with several other high-ranking militia commanders. The world held its breath. Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei appeared on television with tears on his face. He promised, in his own words, severe revenge. Not symbolic, not diplomatic. Severe. 3 days later, Iran launches over a dozen ballistic missiles at American military bases in Iraq, the largest direct Iranian missile attack on American forces in history. Missiles flying in the open. No proxies. No deniability. Iran's name stamped on every warhead. American soldiers have been warned and had time to take cover. But the U.S. military later confirmed that over 100 service members suffered traumatic brain injuries from the blasts. Injuries that would affect them for the rest of their lives. The official U.S. response is measured, restrained, carefully calculated not to trigger the next exchange. Both sides step back from the edge. But here is what almost nobody connects to this story. And this is the part that should make your stomach drop. 3 days after Soleimani is killed, Iran's military is on the highest possible alert. Every radar operator, every missile battery, every soldier in every installation. Fingers tight on triggers, expecting an American counterstrike at any moment. In that state of maximum paranoia, at 6:12 in the morning on January 8, 2020, a Ukrainian passenger jet takes off from Tehran's international airport. An Iranian air defense operator, convinced he is tracking an incoming American cruise missile, fires. Ukraine International Airlines Flight PS752. 176 passengers and crew, many of them Iranian students and families returning to Canada, burned alive in the sky over Tehran, killed by their own country's military, in a war that wasn't even officially declared, as collateral damage in a conflict that started with a drone strike on a single general. This is what happens when two powers push each other to the absolute breaking point. Everyone pays. The soldier, the civilian, the student on the plane who had nothing to do with any of it. Chapter 6. Is history repeating right now? Here is where this stops being history and starts being something you need to pay attention to right now. Everything we just covered, the hostages, the shoot-downs, the proxy wars, the assassinations, it follows a pattern, a cycle that has repeated itself without interruption for over 4 decades. Provocation, retaliation, escalation, near catastrophe, temporary silence. Then it starts again. And right now, in the present day, every single indicator on that cycle is pointing upward. Iran's nuclear program is more advanced today than it has ever been in its history. They are enriching uranium to 60% purity. Weapons grade is 90%. The gap has never been smaller. In 2023 and 2024, Iranian-backed Houthi forces in Yemen launched over 100 drone and missile attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea, one of the busiest trade corridors on the planet, disrupting global supply chains worth trillions of dollars. American warships deployed to the region shot down dozens of Iranian-made drones in live combat engagements. Not drills, not exercises, real combat. Right now, between October 2023 and early 2024, Iranian-backed militias attacked U.S. military bases in Iraq and Syria over 160 times. 160 attacks. And then on January 28, 2024, a drone struck a small American outpost in Jordan called Tower 22. 3 U.S. soldiers were killed. Their names were Sergeant William Rivers, Specialist Kennedy Sanders, Specialist Breonna Moffett. Real people, real families, real funerals, real children who lost a parent, real parents who lost a child. This is not ancient history. This is not a textbook. This is happening on a timeline, that overlaps with your life. And every expert on this conflict agrees on one thing. The question is not if there will be another major confrontation between the United States and Iran. The question is when, and what that confrontation looks like when it finally breaks open. Because there is one more story. One final moment from this long and brutal history. And I promised you at the very beginning that this was coming. Chapter 7, the moment nobody talks about, 10 minutes from war. April 2019. Tensions between the U.S. and Iran are spiking after America withdraws from the Iran nuclear deal and reimposes crippling economic sanctions. Iran's economy is collapsing. Their leadership is furious, and they begin retaliating. Iranian forces attack oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman. They shoot down an American RQ-4 Global Hawk surveillance drone over the Strait of Hormuz, a drone worth over $100 million. The Trump administration is done with warnings. Target packages are drawn up by U.S. military planners. 3 Iranian sites selected. Radar installations. Military positions. The kind of strike designed to send a message that cannot be ignored. President Trump approves the strike. American warplanes take to the air. Ships move into firing positions. Crews receive their orders. Countdown begins. And then, with approximately 10 minutes remaining before the first strike was set to hit Iranian soil, Trump calls it off. He later explains his reasoning publicly. He had asked military advisors how many Iranians would die in the strike. The answer was approximately 150 people. And he decides that number is not proportionate to the loss of an unmanned drone. 10 minutes. That is the margin between a historical footnote and a war that could have pulled in nations from across the region and beyond. 10 minutes between a quiet night and the beginning of something that no one could predicted or controlled. Most people eating dinner that night had no idea any of it was happening, and that more than any specific battle, more than any specific strike, tells you everything you need to know about this conflict. It is always closer than you think. The mechanisms that keep it from exploding are fragile. They depend on individual decisions made by individual human beings in moments of extreme pressure. People who can make mistakes. People who can miscalculate. People who can panic. We have been 10 minutes from war before. We will be 10 minutes from war again. The final word. So here's what all of this means. The U.S.-Iran conflict is not a news cycle. It is not a talking point that disappears after an election. It is not something that began with any single president and will end with the next one. It is a 45-year-old war, fought in shadows and through proxies, fought with drones and diplomatic channels and bombs wired to the side of the road, fought by people who will never meet the leaders who sent them into the dark. It has already killed thousands. Americans, Iranians, Lebanese, Iraqis, and innocent people on planes who never asked to be part of any of it. It follows a pattern that has never once been broken, and the people making the decisions live in a completely different world from the soldiers and sailors and students who pay the price for those decisions. Here's the truth that nobody wants to say out loud. History does not repeat itself, but human nature does. The same pride, the same fear, the same calculation that the other side will blink first, the same belief that one more strike, one more sanction, one more proxy attack will finally force the other side to surrender. It never does, until something fundamentally changes between Washington and Tehran, until the underlying conflict is resolved rather than managed. Every quiet moment between these two nations is not peace. It is just the space between explosions. If you made it this far, you now know more about this conflict than most people who argue about it on the internet every single day. Comment the word proxy below if you think Iran's shadow war strategy is the most dangerous threat America faces in the Middle East right now. Or comment strike if you believe the U.S. should have hit back with full force years ago and changed the entire equation. I read every comment, every single one. Now, we covered 2 planes shot out of the sky in this video. Iran Air Flight 655 and Ukraine International Airlines Flight 752. If those stories hit you the way they should have, you need to watch our video on the worst aviation disasters in history explained. It goes deep into the deadliest crashes ever recorded, including ones caused by military decisions exactly like the ones you just heard about. That video is on screen right now. And if the Soleimani assassination made you wonder what other political killings shaped the world, go watch the most horrific royal assassinations ever. Kings, queens, emperors, taken out in ways that make a drone strike look clean. That one is also on screen. Or, if you want the full unfiltered picture of what America has done in wartime that the textbooks leave out, every major American war crime in 20 minutes is waiting for you. That video connects directly to what we talked about today. Flight 655, the Proxy Wars. All of it. Pick one. Watch it now. Because once you start seeing the pattern, you cannot unsee it.